Hey everybody, it's Leo with Leo the CEO, and I'm here at the Anaheim Packing District. If you haven't been here before, really cool spot to work out of the OC. Wi-Fi everywhere, 2 stories, food, beer, ice cream as far as the eye can see. So if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely a good work spot whenever you're trying to find a place to work. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the networking event that I went to this past weekend. It was awesome. It was called OC Tech, and it was mainly for people in the tech space that have startups or that are trying to fund startups or trying to work with startups. I personally do not like networking events. It's just not my jam. I think it's very superficial, but then again, you have events like last night, which were really fun, really cool way to get to know the people, maybe even reinforce relationships that you already have with people that you've met before. But I kind of wanted to give you my top 10 advice tips on what to do the next time you go to a networking event that'll definitely make you stand out more and have you have a higher probability of leaving the networking event with an actual connection as opposed to maybe 100 cards that you'll never actually utilize or call the people back on. So with that said, let's get started. So most of the tips that I'll be sharing with you today are very highly influenced by Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. He wrote the book years back, but even today I think it's still a quintessential cornerstone for most of the entrepreneurs that are trying to get out there and network in order to make their dreams come true, which is realizing their idea and making it a reality. So the first tip that I want to give you is when you go and you approach somebody that has a company per se, and you ask them about the company, the biggest piece of advice, and the reason it's number one, is you should listen to what they have to say. And that should go without saying, but what I find at most of these networking events is most people are not there to actually listen, they're there to talk. So by being the person that actually asks the question, hey, what do you do? Or what does your startup do? Yeah, and just by merely standing there and paying attention and listening and not waiting for your turn to talk, you're instantly going to stand out in the crowd. The other reason why that's such an important thing is because later on when you decide that they are a valuable connection to you, you're going to have something substantial to say rather than just, weren't you the guy that... So remember, when you first approach somebody, and the first tip that I want to give you is ask them what they do or what their startup does, but then stand there and listen tentatively. Ask good questions if need be, but ask questions that pertain to their startup because you're listening tentatively. The second piece of advice that I want to give you is when you go up to somebody and you ask them, hey, what do you do? And then they give you a very eloquent, well-rehearsed speech or even an elevator pitch at that point, do not come out of the gates by saying, oh, so you're like Netflix. Oh, so you're like Blockbuster. Oh, so you're like Walmart. Oh, so you're like Gamefly. Do not compare somebody's company to a pre-existing, larger, more established company for 2 reasons. Alright, so let's say that you actually get it right, which is very highly unlikely having only known their company for about 2 minutes. Let's say that you get a very accurate comparison of what their company's like. You're essentially just saying, oh, so you're a crappier, less sophisticated version of a well-established, well-funded company that already exists. Little insulting to some, given that most of them may actually be trying to compete with them. So directly referencing their competitor and saying that they're the same thing is a kick in the nuts, because most people, such as myself, will try to compete against big guys and have a differentiator that you are failing to acknowledge. So the first thing they're going to say back to you is, yeah, we are just like Blockbuster, but our big difference is blank. So that's what's going to happen if you guess it right. You're going to compare them to a complete direct competitor, and it's going to be insulting on that route. Let's say, such as every other 98% of the time that anyone ever says those words, oh, so you are the blank of blank, you will most likely get it wrong. And the reason that's going to suck for you in the long term is if you get that wrong right off the bat, they now know one thing about you. You do not know anything about their company. If they're explaining it to you and the first words that come to your mind are, oh, so you're the Netflix of blank. That means, and if it's wrong, that means that you have no idea what their company does. And that puts you in a weird position because everything that you're going to say there on afterwards, give it advice, tips, suggestions, connections you might have, are going to be completely irrelevant because you don't know what they do because you guessed it wrong. The other thing they're going to know about you by saying it wrong is that you didn't take the time to actually listen. You heard a keyword, some hot word, some buzzword that they said, and instead of actually taking the time to listen and ask developing questions about their idea, you associated them instantly to a buzzword that they said, and it shows that you're lazy, quite frankly, and it shows that you're uninterested so much that you can't fully devote your attention to the rest of the 30-second pitch, and you more so associated themselves. So I know a lot of us do this because it's human tendency and human nature, but try your best not to associate an idea with a pre-existing concept, because like I said, one, you'll get it right and you just called them a competitor, a weaker, watered down version of their competitor. Or two, you get it completely wrong and it shows that you weren't even paying attention so much that you just went the wrong way. And everyone knows the worst thing in the startup culture is when somebody gets your idea wrong, you're gonna have to then try to put them down easy and say, no, that's not what we do. Or try to just completely blow them off and go off to the next person by saying, yep, that's what we do. We pretty much suck. I'm gonna go to the next guy. Maybe he'll actually listen to what I have to say because you didn't. So tip number 3, right? Let's say that you meet someone and they give you the whole elevator pitch and you got everything locked down. You actually listened and you paid attention and now you're ready to rock because you know exactly what their company is, right? The next thing is something I don't want you to do, and it's tip number 3. Don't advise them on how to run their company, given that you've only known their company for roughly about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And this is a biggie because everyone who comes to these things, and I hear this word thrown out a lot, I'm a consultant of X, Y, and Z. I've only been out of college for about 4 weeks and I'm a consultant of X, Y, and Z. It's possible, it is very possible that you might have a connection that they would very much value, or that you might have a suggestion that you've tried in the past that is very relevant and very partial to what they're doing. But the reason that you don't want to advise on what they should do is because, one, chances of them actually taking a complete stranger's piece of advice and implementing it into their baby, their company that they've been working on for years before they met you, are very, very seldom. The chances that they'll do that are virtually non-existing, and you're just gonna come off as a complete butthole for almost sounding like, well, I know that you've been doing this for 5 years, I've heard about it for about 2.5 minutes, and I already know the path that you should take. Don't advise anybody on their company on the first meeting, if for the first few I would suggest, but don't advise anybody after they just told you what it is. Instead, I suggest making recommendations in a more antidote kind of way. So maybe expressing a story that helped you and kind of subliminally suggesting some stuff. I mean, that's a far extent if you have to dire need make a suggestion. Other than that, your suggestion better be golden. I mean, you should have connections to Bill Gates' son if you're gonna make a suggestion that they will actually utilize initially, having just met you. So tip number 3, do not advise somebody on how to run their company if you just found out what their company was. Point blank. Okay, so tip number 4 that I want to give you. When you go to these networking events, nobody, and I repeat, nobody is there to actually listen to you. And the reason is, everyone is going there really excited to share about their idea. Very few people come with the mindset that they're gonna take in information and unselfishly help other people without getting anything in return. So the reason this is such a big note for you to take into hand is when you go and you start talking about your company to about 40 different people, and you start realizing that the common denominator amongst all of your conversations is that they all revolve around you talking and then everyone politely leaving. What you want to do instead when you go to these networking events is start listening to people. Like we mentioned earlier, ask the questions. Now, when you finally find somebody that you think can serve of proper value and of proper use to you, that's your time to actually talk. Do not start the conversations by talking about you. Talk about asking them about them. Now, this is a networking event. The sole purpose of them that everyone is coming for is to see, can they find funding? Can they find someone to work with? Or can they find somebody that can be a connection for them? So by starting off the conversation by saying, hi, my name is Leo. What is your idea? Standing there, like we talked about, listening to them tentatively, you now can say something that is tailored to what they want to hear. The opposite of that is by starting the conversation by saying, hi, my name is Leo. I'm gonna talk for the next 20 minutes knowing that you do not care because you're simply waiting until I say something that is of value to you. So instead of waiting 20 minutes and then after the conversation saying, Is there anything that's of value to you? Listen to them first. Find a reason for you to talk. And when you find that reason, give them your elevator pitch, but it has to be tailored around that connection. Because if you don't do that, you're gonna talk to 40 people that day and no one will remember you for anything other than the guy who talked about himself only. Instead, what you want everyone to remember you by is the guy who had that really, really valuable thing that can help them succeed, and they can do the same for them, vice versa. So tip number 4, do not start every conversation by talking about yourself. Start by talking about their startup idea or about a connection that you have, but do not make the conversation about you. So the 5th tip that I want to leave you with is come into these networking events with an elevator pitch ready in hand. Now, I don't personally have much history in following the traditional sense, you know, business plan, business cards, all that fun stuff. But your elevator pitch is quintessential. Let me tell you why. If you go up to somebody and you spew out just word vomit, not only are they not gonna listen like we already said, they quite frankly will try to leave as fast as they can because you're wasting their time. Because it shows that you obviously don't have a concrete hold on what it is that your idea does, much less make money, which, let's be frank, most of us are in business to make money. So with that said, have a 15 to 30 second max elevator pitch. And let's say that you don't, that's cool, because some of you guys watching this are in a very, very early stage of your company. If you don't have an elevator pitch, which is supposed to explain the broad and the narrowed version of your company in 30 seconds, if you don't have that, but you have a concept, what you want to do is take those 15 seconds of elevator pitch and instead explain a transaction. So something might sound like, hi, hello, my name is Leo with Leo the CEO, and I want to tell you about my blog. Essentially what it is people watch, they learn a bunch of cool stuff, and they leave and they go make a lot of money. So try to explain a transaction in terms of the process leading up to the monetary gain, and then leave it off at that. Most people will understand transactions much better than they will mission statements and vision statements and theories and all that fun stuff. So tip number 5, have some form of an elevator pitch down. If you don't have that, be able to explain a transaction your company does in 15 to 30 seconds. Now, a little bonus tip off to tip number 5. As much as you may think it matters, which it might, in the initial state, most people don't really care about the philanthropic side of your company until they understand what your company does. So until you can explain and sell to them the idea that your company recycles dog bones and turns them into houses, they really will not care that you sell those houses for a profit and give the money to somebody in Guatemala, because they're still hung up on the first step. So when you're giving your elevator pitch or your transaction pitch, make sure that they fully and accurately understand that before you start blasting off at the mouth about how you're a B Corp and you're here to save the world. They're gonna be lost and they're gonna try to leave as fast as they can. And most likely, they're not even gonna understand you enough to try to help you. So, a little bonus tip off, don't go off into a philanthropic kind of monologue about yourself. Stick to the point, sell your idea, keep it there, move on from the next step.